She thought her daughter fell in battle, but a human brought her back. The war between humans and the Valyrix Empire had lasted so long that most beings in the galaxy no longer remembered how it had started. Borders had blurred, names of planets had turned into numbers, and lives were counted only in losses. On the crystal world of Valtir, the Valyrix homeworld, silence ruled a vast hall of memory where light passed through towering glass pillars. Inside each pillar was a name. Commander Jaren stood alone in that hall. She was tall even by Valyrix standards, her armor dark and marked by many campaigns. Scars crossed her face, earned through decades of battle. To her people, she was known as Iron Wing, a leader who never retreated and never doubted. But in this hall, she was not a commander. She was a mother. Her eyes rested on one pillar near the center. Lureth Jaren, fallen in battle, the words glowed softly as if trying to offer comfort. They failed. Jaren placed a clawed hand against the glass. Her daughter's name felt unreal, carved into memory stone. Lureth had been strong, curious, and brave, too brave perhaps. She had followed Jaren into the military, believing in honor and duty. Weeks ago, her unit had been deployed to the outer systems to stop a human advance. Only one message had returned. Unit destroyed. No survivors, no body, no signal, just a report signed and sealed by High Command. In Valyrix culture, death in battle was the highest honor. A fallen warrior was celebrated, not mourned. Jaren knew the words she was supposed to feel: pride, acceptance, strength. But as the hall lights dimmed, she felt only a deep, quiet pain. Far from Valtir, on a broken moon orbiting a dying star, the battlefield still burned. The moon had no name, only a code used by military maps. Its surface was torn apart by craters and melted metal. Wrecked ships lay half buried in ash and stone. Smoke drifted through thin air, carrying the smell of burned engines and blood. Human medic Elias Ward moved carefully through the ruins. His armor was scratched and dented, marked with the red symbol of medical aid. He was not a soldier by choice. He had joined to save lives, not take them. Around him, the battle was over, but death still lingered. Elias scanned the ground with a handheld device, searching for life signs. The screen flickered again and again, showing nothing but silence. He had already found too many bodies, human and alien alike. Each one felt like a failure. Then the scanner beeped, weak, fading. But alive. Elias froze, then ran toward the signal. He climbed over twisted metal and broken stone until he reached the remains of a Valyrix transport ship. The hull was split open like a wound. Inside, crushed seats and shattered controls told the story of a violent crash. And there, beneath a fallen support beam, lay a Valyrix soldier. She was badly injured. Dark blue blood stained her armor, and her breathing was shallow and uneven. One arm was trapped, the bone clearly broken. Her helmet was cracked, revealing a young face, too young for war. Elias knew the rules. Valyrix soldiers were enemies. The area was unstable. Command had ordered all medics to withdraw, and Valyrix forces were known to execute humans on sight. He also knew something else. She was alive. He hesitated only a moment. Elias activated his cutting tool and began to free her. The beam was heavy, but desperation gave him strength. Slowly, painfully, he moved it aside. The alien gasped as pressure lifted from her chest. "Easy," Elias said softly, though he knew she could not understand him. "I've got you." He injected a universal stabilizer and wrapped her wounds as best he could. Her life signs were weak but holding. The scanner showed signs of internal damage, but survival was possible. Elias looked around. The sky glowed red from distant fires. This place would not stay quiet for long. He made his decision. With effort, he lifted the Valyrix soldier and carried her away from the wreckage toward an old mining outpost marked on his map. It was abandoned, forgotten by both sides. It would have to be enough. Hours later, the outpost lights flickered back to life. Elias laid the alien on a metal table and began working with limited tools. He studied her biology carefully, adjusting treatments based on observation and instinct. He had treated aliens before, but never a Valyrix. Their species was known for strength, not fragility, yet this one looked painfully vulnerable. As he worked, he noticed a marking on her armor, an insignia of high rank. "She's important," Elias muttered. That made his choice even more dangerous. Back on Valtir, Jaren stood before the High Command. The council chamber was wide and cold, filled with commanders and advisors. News of the battle had already spread. "The humans left no survivors," one counselor said. They flee when challenged, but they are ruthless in combat. Jaren said nothing. Her thoughts were far away. The next phase begins now, another voice added. We strike their supply lines, we make them feel the loss they caused. Jaren felt anger stir, hot and sharp. The image of her daughter's name burned in her mind. Yes, she said finally, we make them remember. She did not know that her words, spoken in grief, would soon be tested by truth. In the outpost, the Valyrix soldier stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first. Pain flooded her senses. She tried to move and failed. Panic rose in her chest. Then she saw him. A human. Fear took hold instantly. She tried to pull away, but her body refused. Her breath quickened, and she reached weakly for a weapon that was no longer there. Elias raised his hands and stepped back. It's okay, he said gently. You're safe, I won't hurt you. She did not understand the words, but she understood the tone. Confusion replaced fear. Humans were supposed to be cruel. That was what she had been taught. They were said to leave enemies to die, to show no mercy. Yet here she was, alive, bandaged, breathing. Her eyes met his, and for a moment the war outside seemed very far away. Elias watched her carefully, relief washing over him. She was awake. That alone felt like a victory. You were left behind, he said quietly, mostly to himself. But you're not dead, not today. Outside, distant engines echoed through the sky. Search patrols were coming. Elias looked at the door, then back at the wounded alien. Leaving her now would be easier, safer. He stayed. And in that moment, without knowing it, a single human choice began to change the fate of two worlds. The outpost was quiet, but it was not peaceful. Old metal walls creaked as the structure adjusted to temperature changes. Dust floated slowly in the air, catching weak light from a single working panel. Outside, the red sky of the broken moon glowed faintly, and far away, the sound of engines came and went like distant thunder. Elias Ward sat on the floor near the metal table, his back against the wall. He had removed his helmet, his face tired and marked with dirt and sweat. He had not slept. He did not know how long he had been awake, only that the scanner beside him still showed a weak but stable life signal. The Valyrix soldier was alive. She lay still, her chest rising slowly. Her injuries were serious. Broken bones, internal trauma, and deep wounds that human medicine was not designed to treat. Elias had done everything he could with what little he had. Now he waited. When her eyes opened again, it was more slowly this time. Awareness returned in pieces. Pain was still there, but duller, pushed back by medicine. She turned her head slightly and saw the human again. He was still there. That confused her more than the pain. She watched him quietly. Humans were smaller than Valyrix, softer, less armored by nature. Yet this one had walked into a battlefield and pulled her from wreckage. That made no sense. She tried to speak. Her throat was dry and the sounds that came out were weak. Elias noticed immediately. He stood and moved closer, careful not to frighten her. He held up a small container of clear liquid and gently tilted it toward her lips. Slow, he said softly. She drank. The liquid was cool and helped ease the burning in her throat. When he pulled it away, she looked at him again, searching his face for threat. There was none. Only worry. Her mind struggled to accept it. Valyric's doctrine was clear. Humans were dangerous, emotional, unpredictable. Mercy was a trick. Kindness was a weapon. And yet she was alive. She closed her eyes, exhausted by confusion. Elias released a breath he did not realize he was holding. He returned to the scanner and checked her readings again, still fragile but improving. She's strong, he whispered. Stronger than she looks. Hours passed. Outside, Valyric's patrol ship swept the area, searching for survivors, prisoners, or evidence of human escape. Their sensors passed over the abandoned outpost more than once, but its old systems masked most signals. Each time engines roared overhead, Elias felt his heart tighten. If they found him, there would be no explanation, no mercy. He could still leave. That thought returned again and again. He could slip away under cover of darkness. He could save himself. No one would know what he had done. He looked at the Valyrix soldier. She had been left behind by her own people, written off as dead, forgotten for the sake of efficiency. Elias clenched his jaw. No, he said quietly. I don't leave people. On Vaeltir, Commander Jaren prepared for war. The mourning period had ended. Her armor was polished, her weapons prepared. She stood before a tactical display showing human territories and supply routes. Each mark represented a target. Each target represented lives. Her advisors spoke, offering strategies and predictions, but she barely heard them. Her thoughts returned again and again to the memory hall. to her daughter's name. Lureth had been her only child. Clever, stubborn, full of questions, she had wanted to explore, not conquer. Jaren had pushed her toward command training, believing it would keep her safe. Now that choice felt like a blade in her chest. "We strike here," Jaren said, pointing to a system near human space. "They will respond. When they do, we break them." No one challenged her. Grief made her dangerous, and everyone knew it. Back in the outpost, the Valeric soldier woke again, this time with more strength. She tested her limbs slowly. Pain answered her movements, but it was manageable. Her broken arm was supported by a careful brace. Her wounds were sealed with unfamiliar materials. She studied them. Human work, her eyes narrowed. She had been trained to spot deception, to expect traps. This felt too careful, too patient to be fake. She turned her head and saw Elias asleep against the wall, exhaustion finally having won. His breathing was slow and steady. His weapon lay untouched on a nearby table. He trusted her. That realization unsettled her deeply. Valeric's culture did not trust enemies. Trust was earned through loyalty and strength, not compassion. She tried to sit up. Pain flared, but she pushed through it, driven by the need to understand. She reached for a data pad lying nearby. It contained medical notes written in simple symbols and diagrams, all about her. Her name caught her attention. "Lureth," she whispered. Hearing it spoken aloud grounded her. She was alive, not fallen, not a memory. Her mother did not know. That thought struck her harder than any wound. Elias stirred and opened his eyes. He sat up quickly when he saw her moving. "Easy," he said again, instinctively gentle. "You're not ready yet." She looked at him directly now. There was no fear in her eyes, only questions. "Human," she said slowly, her voice rough. "Why?" The word carried weight. "Why save her? Why risk everything?" Elias paused. He considered lying. He considered giving a simple answer. Instead, he told the truth. "Because you were alive," he said. "That was enough." She stared at him, her crest lowering slightly in disbelief. "That answer," she said, "has no logic." He gave a small, tired smile. "Yeah, I get that a lot." Silence followed, not hostile, just uncertain. Lureth studied him, truly studied him. He was scarred, tired, and clearly afraid of something outside, yet he stayed. That meant more to her than any explanation. "You know," she said slowly, "my people believe humans abandon the weak." Elias looked down at his hands. "Some do, some don't." Her chest tightened. That simple truth carried more weight than speeches or threats. Outside, a sudden burst of noise shattered the quiet. Closer this time. Valeric's patrol ships descended nearby, engines screaming as landing crews deployed. Their voices echoed through the thin air. They were searching the ground now. Elias moved quickly. He shut down unnecessary systems and dimmed the lights further. He helped Lureth lie back down and secured her brace. "They can't see you," he whispered, "but they might hear us." Her eyes widened slightly. "They will kill you." He nodded. "I know." "Leave," she said urgently. "Now," he shook his head. "Not happening." For the first time since waking, Lureth felt fear, not for herself, but for him. Heavy footsteps approached the outpost. A beam of light swept across the outer wall. Voices spoke in sharp Valeric's tones. "They are close," she said quietly. Elias positioned himself between the door and the table, unarmed. If they came inside, there would be no fight, only a choice. The footsteps paused, then moved away. Minutes passed, long, unbearable minutes. Finally, the engines lifted and the noise faded into the distance. Elias sank back against the wall, his hands shaking. "They didn't find us," he whispered. Lureth closed her eyes, relief washing through her. Her heart raced with a truth she could no longer deny. This human had saved her twice now. Far away on Vaeltir, Commander Jaren stared at a new report. Patrols confirmed no Valeric survivors recovered from the battlefield. Her daughter remained listed as fallen. Jaren closed her eyes and hardened her heart. She would make the humans pay. She did not know that her daughter was alive. She did not know that a single human medic was standing between truth and war. And the galaxy moved closer to a moment that would change everything. The silence in the outpost felt heavier with every passing moment. Elias sat against the cold, rusted wall, trying to steady his breathing. His heart pounded in his chest, and his palms were sweaty. The Valeric's patrol ships were still out there, somewhere searching for any sign of life, any trace of human or alien movement. He had barely escaped detection again. He knew it was only a matter of time before they would return. He looked over at the table where Lureth lay. She had fallen asleep, though the slight rise and fall of her chest showed that she was still recovering. It had been 2 days since he found her, and though she was still weak, there was a steady improvement in her condition. Her skin, once ashen, was beginning to regain its natural color, and her breathing had become less labored. But there was still so much to do. He couldn't let his guard down. The weight of the situation pressed on him. If the Valerics found him here, if they discovered he was hiding a member of their own species, they would kill him without question. And worse, they might torture him for information. He was just one human alone in the depths of enemy territory. He had no backup, no reinforcements. He had no plan, but he had made a promise. "Stay hidden," he whispered to himself, glancing at the table again. "Stay safe." He was so lost in his thoughts that he didn't hear the faint sound of footsteps outside the door at first. His instincts kicked in, though, and he shot to his feet, hand instinctively reaching for the weapon he had left by the table. But his fingers stopped just short. There was no time for anything. The door creaked as it opened, and Elias' heart leaped into his throat. His muscles tensed, ready to spring into action. A shadow entered the room. It was not a Valeric soldier. Elias' breath released in a sharp exhale, relief flooding his chest. But the figure in the doorway was not exactly human, either. It was Lureth. She had gotten up from the table and, despite her injuries, was standing there, her body barely supported by the metal frame. Her eyes were wide with uncertainty. She was staring at him like she wasn't sure whether to speak, to run, or to— "Don't," Elias said, stepping forward quickly. He reached out and grabbed her arm, guiding her back toward the table before she could fall. "You're not ready to move yet. You need to rest." Lureth looked at him with confusion in her eyes, but she didn't resist. She sat back down on the table, her gaze never leaving his face. "You are human," she said slowly, her voice raspy. "But why? Why did you not leave me?" "You risk your life for an enemy." Elias sat down beside her, his hands trembling as he ran them through his hair. "I told you before, you're alive. That's all that matters to me." Lureth blinked as if processing what he had said, her head tilted slightly. "You do not understand, my people." "I understand enough," Elias interrupted, his voice soft but firm. He looked into her eyes, trying to make her see the truth. "You were left behind, your people abandoned you, but I couldn't." She stared at him for a long moment, and Elias could almost hear the conflict in her mind. She had been taught that mercy was a weakness, that humans were ruthless and cold. Yet here she was, alive, because of the very people her species had sworn to destroy. "Why would you do this?" she asked again, her voice more fragile now. He shrugged, though the gesture felt awkward. "Maybe it's just who I am. Maybe it's because I don't think anyone deserves to be left to die alone." He shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe I just couldn't leave you behind." Lureth closed her eyes, clearly struggling to understand. But there was something else in her gaze now, something Elias couldn't quite read. Trust, fear, maybe a mixture of both. Then the noise came again. Not far off, the familiar sound of engines rumbled through the thin air, vibrating the walls of the outpost. Elias stiffened, and for a moment he froze. The patrol ships were getting closer. Lureth's eyes widened in realization. "They are coming." Elias grabbed his communicator and turned the frequency to the lowest setting, ensuring it wouldn't give off a signal. He cursed under his breath. There was no escape now. He couldn't move Lureth any further without risking detection. His only chance was to hide. Lureth seemed to understand that without words. She shifted, trying to make herself as small as possible on the table, pulling her legs up beneath her. Elias followed suit, crouching down in a dark corner, his breathing shallow, trying to remain still. Every noise outside felt like it was amplified. Every second dragged on like an eternity. Then the door creaked open again. Elias' pulse raced. His eyes flicked to Lureth, who was still as a stone. He had to trust her. He had to hope that the Valerics wouldn't see her, wouldn't recognize her as one of their own. The tension in the room was unbearable. The silhouette of a Valeric soldier filled the doorway, the creature's massive form blocking the faint light from outside. Elias' heart skipped a beat. He held his breath, praying the soldier would move past him. The Valeric soldier stepped forward, scanning the room with careful precision. Elias felt his hands start to sweat as he watched the soldier's helmet turn slightly in his direction. His heart thudded in his chest. Time seemed to slow as the soldier took another step forward, his foot crunching on the dusty floor. And then the soldier stopped. Elias held his breath, every muscle tense, every nerve on fire. The Valeric soldier's head tilted to the side, as if noticing something out of place. The soldier's eyes narrowed, scanning the room again, but not quite looking in the corner where Elias and Lureth hid. A long, agonizing moment passed. And then, just as Elias was ready to spring into action, the soldier turned and left the room. Elias released a shaky breath, feeling as if his lungs had been constricted the entire time. He didn't dare move for several moments, still frozen in place, unsure if the soldier was truly gone or if it was just a trick. Lureth's breathing had also been shallow, but now she exhaled slowly, her eyes meeting his. There was a strange look in her gaze now, something close to awe. She seemed to understand, perhaps for the first time, just how far Elias had gone to protect her. The silence in the room felt oppressive. Elias' hands were shaking, and his heartbeat was still racing. It felt like the whole world had been holding its breath, waiting for the moment to break. "You're still alive," Lureth said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't thank me," Elias said, shaking his head. "I'm just doing what anyone would do. I couldn't let you die." Her eyes softened. "Not anyone, not my people." "Yeah, well," Elias said, offering a small, weary smile, "maybe that's the difference." Lureth didn't answer. Instead, she looked out toward the door as though trying to process what had just happened. Her brow furrowed, and Elias could see the tension in her body returning. The past few days had been a whirlwind of survival for both of them. They had been playing a game of chance, one that neither of them could afford to lose. Another sound, quieter this time, filled the room. The distant hum of engines fading away, signaling that the patrol had moved on. Elias exhaled slowly, allowing himself a moment of relief, but he knew better than to believe they were safe. The silence that followed was not peaceful, nor was it reassuring. It was the quiet that always came before the storm. Elias and Lureth both knew it. The question now was simple. How long would they have before the next wave of soldiers came looking for them? And could they survive long enough to find a way out? Time was running out. The sun had long set, and the cold of the broken moon's surface seeped into the outpost. The temperature outside was dropping rapidly, and the air felt thin and brittle. Inside, the air was still, save for the faint hum of old power generators struggling to maintain a weak connection. The walls groaned as the building adjusted to the night's chill, but Elias couldn't bring himself to care about the discomfort. His thoughts were elsewhere. He sat near the table where Lureth lay, still recovering. She was strong, stronger than he had expected. Despite the trauma, she was adapting quickly, and her recovery seemed to be progressing faster than he could have hoped. But that was also the problem. The closer she came to full strength, the more he feared what would happen when she was no longer dependent on him. What would she think then? For now, though, she was still weak, still healing. Elias knew that he couldn't let his guard down. He had already put both of them at risk by staying in the outpost, and it was only a matter of time before the Valorix soldiers returned to sweep the area again. His eyes flicked over to her. She was awake now, sitting on the edge of the table, her gaze fixed on the door. Her body was still covered in the bandages he had applied, and she had a distant look in her eyes as she stared into the darkness. "Lureth," Elias said quietly, trying to break the silence. "How are you feeling?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned her head toward him, her expression unreadable. She had come a long way since the first day he had found her. Her eyes no longer held the same fear, the same uncertainty that had defined her at the beginning. Now there was a sharpness to her gaze, a quiet strength that made Elias nervous in its own way. "I feel stronger," she said slowly, her voice still rough from the injury. "But I don't understand why you are helping me." Elias sighed, running a hand through his hair. He had expected this question, though it was harder to answer now that they were so close to the point of no return. He had been honest with her from the start, but there was still so much she didn't understand, still so much about humans that didn't make sense to her. "I've told you before," Elias said softly. "You were left behind, you were hurt, and I couldn't just leave you to die." "But I am an enemy," she said, her voice still tinged with confusion. "You risk your life to save me, yet I am a soldier of the Valorix Empire. I have killed humans. I have destroyed your people. Why would you do this?" Elias stared at her, the weight of the question sinking in. He opened his mouth to speak, but found no easy answer. There were 1,000 reasons why he could have walked away, 1,000 justifications to leave her behind and disappear into the night. He could have rationalized it, told himself that the mission was more important, that his own survival came first. But something inside him wouldn't let him. "I don't know," Elias admitted after a long pause. "Maybe because I couldn't leave you to die, because it's not right. I've seen enough death, enough suffering. I couldn't be a part of that." Loreth's eyes narrowed slightly, her alien features studying him intently. Her thoughts seemed to be a tangle of contradictions. Everything she had ever known, everything her people had taught her, told her that humans were heartless and cruel. Yet here he was, risking everything for her, someone who had been his enemy, someone who had been part of the force that had killed so many humans in the past. "I don't understand," she whispered, shaking her head. "Your people, you fight us, you kill us. And yet you save me." Elias stood and walked over to where she sat. He had to resist the urge to reach out and comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay. He knew that would be a lie. There was no easy answer, no quick solution to this mess. But for some reason, he still believed they could figure it out. "We're not all like that," Elias said quietly. "Not all humans are killers and not all of us want war, but sometimes we have to fight. Sometimes there's no other choice." Loreth was silent for a long time, her eyes focused on the floor. She seemed lost in thought, her mind wrestling with the contradictions she couldn't understand. Elias didn't push her. He knew better than to expect her to accept his words right away. Trust wasn't something that could be given, it had to be earned. Suddenly, the low rumble of engines cut through the stillness of the night. Elias' heart skipped a beat. He recognized the sound immediately. It was the unmistakable hum of Valyric's patrol ships, closed this time. They were coming back. Loreth's eyes went wide with alarm. She started to stand, but her injuries were still too severe and she staggered slightly. Elias quickly moved to support her, holding her steady. He knew they didn't have much time. "You need to stay down," he said urgently. "They can't see you, they can't know you're here." Loreth's eyes flicked toward the door, her face drawn with fear. "They will find us, they will kill you, you cannot stay here, you must go." Elias shook his head, his expression firm. "I'm not leaving you, I'm not going anywhere." "You should," she insisted, her voice almost pleading. "You should leave before they come. If they find you here, they will kill you. It will not matter that you helped me." "I've made my choice," Elias replied. "I'm staying." The rumble of engines grew louder and Elias' pulse quickened. He had no illusions about what would happen if they found him here. They wouldn't care that he had saved a Valyric soldier. They wouldn't care that he had tried to help. All that mattered was that he was human and he was a threat to their empire. To them, his actions were a betrayal. He glanced around the room quickly, looking for a place to hide. The walls were thin and there was nowhere to hide both of them. They were trapped. He didn't know what to do. Loreth seemed to read his mind. She grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the small storage closet in the back of the room. "We must hide," she said, her voice low and urgent. "Quickly." Elias hesitated for only a moment before following her. He didn't want to hide, he didn't want to run, but right now there was no other choice. He had to keep her safe at least for a little while longer. They crouched down in the corner of the dark, cramped space, barely breathing. The sound of the engines grew closer, and Elias' heart pounded in his ears. He could feel the heat of Loreth's body next to him, her sharp breathing matching his own. Every second felt like an eternity. The door to the outpost creaked open, and Elias held his breath. The shadow of a Valyric soldier passed by the entrance, and Elias' stomach twisted with fear. The soldier's boots clanged loudly on the metal floor as they moved deeper into the outpost. Then came the voice. The cold, commanding tone of a Valyric's officer echoed through the narrow halls. "Search the area, we'll find them, the human and the deserter." Elias stiffened, his hand instinctively reaching for the small weapon he kept hidden at his side. But there was no time to fight. If they were caught, there would be no escape. The soldiers moved closer. The silence between them felt unbearable. Elias' pulse quickened and his eyes locked onto Loreth's. They were both terrified. They both knew what would happen if they were discovered. But then the soldiers moved away. A moment passed, then another. Elias felt the tension in his body slowly begin to ease. The sounds of footsteps faded, and he realized with a rush of disbelief that they had been missed. For now. Loreth let out a shaky breath, her grip on Elias' arm loosening. They stayed hidden for a long time, not daring to move, not daring to make a sound. The sound of engines finally faded into the distance. Loreth turned to Elias, her eyes wide with something he couldn't quite place. Gratitude, fear, maybe a mix of both. "We are not safe," she whispered, her voice full of quiet urgency. "But you saved us again." Elias nodded, his mind already racing with the implications. They weren't out of danger, not by a long shot, but for the first time since he had found her, he allowed himself a small, relieved smile. "Yeah," he said softly. "We made it through this one, but we need to keep moving." Lureth's gaze softened. "I will fight by your side," she said, her voice steady now. "Not as an enemy, but as an ally." Elias didn't respond immediately. He just nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. Together, they had survived another close call. But what would happen when the next wave of soldiers came? What would happen when they could no longer hide? That question would have to wait. For now, they were still alive. And that, Elias knew, was the quiet of the outpost was broken only by the soft hum of the power generators, which were struggling to keep the lights flickering. Outside, the cold moon stretched across the barren horizon, its pale light casting eerie shadows on the ground. For a brief moment, Elias allowed himself to breathe deep and slow, letting the tension of the past few days slip away. They had survived. It felt strange, almost impossible. After all the close calls, the fear of being discovered, and the constant uncertainty, they were still here. Still alive. But Elias knew better than to take it for granted. He had seen too much to ever feel safe, especially with the Valyric's forces still hunting them. Lureth sat near the window now, her gaze locked on the horizon. She had grown quieter in recent hours, as if the weight of their situation had finally caught up with her. It was only natural. She had been through so much in so little time. Injured, abandoned, saved by a human, then forced to hide, knowing that each day could be their last. Elias watched her from across the room. He could see the internal struggle in her eyes, the conflict between who she had been and who she was becoming. She had once believed that humans were heartless, that they were enemies to be defeated, and yet here she was, alive because of one human's decision to save her. Her story, her identity, was being rewritten. "I should leave," Lureth said suddenly, breaking the silence. Her voice was low, almost to herself, as though she was trying to convince herself more than him. Elias frowned, pushing away from the table. "You should stay. You can't keep running." She didn't look at him. Her eyes were still fixed on the horizon, her thoughts distant. "My people won't stop until I'm found," she said softly. "They'll come for me, and they'll come for you too. I can't let you die because of me." "You're not the one who's going to make that decision," Elias replied. His voice was steady, but his heart raced. The thought of leaving her alone, abandoned again, shook him to his core. "We've been through too much together for me to just walk away." Lureth finally turned her head, her eyes searching his face. There was something in her expression, something that had shifted in the way she looked at him. He could see the fear in her eyes, but also something else, something deeper, something that had begun to form between them. "I owe you my life," she said quietly, the weight of the words heavy. "More than once." Elias shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. I did what I had to do." The silence stretched between them again. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The outpost seemed to hold its breath, as if the whole world was waiting for something. The quiet was broken by the sudden, sharp crackle of static from Elias' communicator. His heart skipped a beat as he quickly reached for the device, his fingers shaking as he activated the signal. "This is Elias Ward. Go ahead," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Elias," came the voice on the other end. It was a low, steady voice, one he hadn't heard in days. "This is Captain Reynolds. We've got a situation." Elias' pulse quickened. His eyes flicked to Lureth, who was already looking at him, her expression unreadable. "What kind of situation?" Elias asked, his voice tight. "We've picked up unusual readings near your location. We're pretty sure it's Valyrix. You're not alone out there. We're going to need you to evac. Now." Elias felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He stood up, moving to the corner of the room where he paced quickly, trying to think. This was it. This was the moment they had been dreading. Valyrix was getting closer, and they couldn't outrun them much longer. Lureth stood up as well, her eyes sharp and calculating. She was a soldier trained for moments like this. "Where are they?" she asked, her voice suddenly colder, more focused. "We've got a few hours before they arrive," Captain Reynolds said. "But we'll need you to hold tight. We can't risk them finding you if you move." Elias ran his hand through his hair, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had thought they had more time. He had hoped they had more time, but hope wasn't enough in situations like this. He turned to Lureth. "We have to move. There's no choice." She nodded, her face set in determination. "I will fight. I will protect you." Elias' heart clenched at her words. He had never wanted her to have to fight, but he knew that was the only option now. They couldn't hide forever. The Valyrix would find them sooner or later. And when they did, there would be no place left to run. "Let's go," Elias said, his voice low and resolute. He knew that they didn't have much time left. They moved quickly, gathering their belongings and preparing for the inevitable. Elias took a moment to check the outpost's external sensors, making sure there was no immediate threat. But deep down, he knew it was futile. The Valyrics would come. They always did. Lureth walked over to him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "I will make sure you get out of here alive, Elias," she said. There was a fierce intensity in her voice, and Elias believed her. In that moment, he didn't doubt her. She had become something more than just the alien soldier she had been. She had become someone he could trust. Someone he couldn't let go of. He gave her a small smile. "I'll hold you to that." Just as they were about to move out, the ground shook beneath their feet. The distant rumble of engines filled the air, and the walls of the outpost vibrated from the impact of a heavy landing. They were here. Lureth moved into position, her body taut with readiness. She had fallen into the role of protector in the last few days, and Elias knew she would do whatever it took to keep him safe. But he also knew that no matter how strong she was, they were both outnumbered, and the Valyrics' forces were ruthless. The door to the outpost opened with a low creak, and Elias' hand instinctively went to his weapon. He turned to Lureth, his expression serious. "Stay low." "We need to move quickly," she nodded. They were ready. The moment the door opened fully, the first Valyric soldier stepped through, scanning the room with a practiced eye. Elias and Lureth were hidden behind a stack of old crates, waiting for the right moment. The soldier took another step, and Elias could feel his heart pounding in his chest. They had to move, now. Lureth's body was already in motion before Elias could even react. She leapt from her hiding place, taking the Valyric soldier down in one swift, controlled motion. The soldier hit the ground with a heavy thud, his weapon clattering out of reach. Elias followed quickly, moving toward the door. But just as they were about to escape, another soldier appeared, blocking their exit. Elias drew his weapon, but before he could fire, Lureth was already on him, knocking the soldier back with a powerful kick. She was fast, deadly. Elias could hardly keep up. It was a terrifying reminder of just how much training and strength she had. But in this moment, her power was their greatest asset. They ran, pushing through the door and into the cold night air. The Valyric soldiers were behind them, but they were faster, and they had the element of surprise on their side. The landscape outside was dark and desolate. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the rocky terrain. Elias' eyes scanned the area, searching for an escape route. Lureth moved ahead, her eyes scanning the terrain for any signs of danger. "There," she said, pointing toward a narrow passage between two jagged cliffs. It was their best shot at escaping, but it would also trap them. Elias hesitated for a moment, then he nodded. There was no choice. They ran. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. The Valyric soldiers were relentless, but Elias and Lureth pushed forward, determined to make it out alive. The narrow passage was their only hope. They reached it just as the soldiers closed in, but they were not alone. The ground beneath their feet suddenly cracked, and a rumbling sound filled the air. The rocks shifted, and a massive boulder blocked the path behind them. The Valyric soldiers had no choice but to stop. Elias and Lureth were free, at least for now. They turned to each other, both breathing heavily, but for the first time, Elias saw something else in Lureth's eyes. Hope. "We made it," Elias said, his voice hoarse with relief. He looked at her and smiled, the weight of everything they had been through finally settling in. Lureth nodded, her face softened by a quiet resolve. "We're not done yet," she said, her voice steady, "but for now we fight together." And in that moment, Elias knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together.